Hello and welcome back to another episode of Diablo to D&D. My name is David, and today we're going to be creating the Druid's Ravens. Campaign update is put on hold. We haven't been able to meet this week, or last week, unfortunately. But I do have something for the changelog. The Amazon's decoy has clearer wording to show effects used on it still have effect if they do something besides intelligence, wisdom, charisma, or constitution checks or saving throws. So previously the wording was something around the lines of if it makes one of these checks or saves, the effect is wasted. But the idea is like if somebody casts a twin spell on the decoy and another creature, then it doesn't just negate the entire spell, it's just the decoy, it doesn't get affected by these things. Super simple, so let's move on. So this is not really a part of the channel itself, but it is something to note. Diablo Immortal just announced a new class, the Tempest. It's this dual-wielding water and wind elemental fighter thing. You can kind of think of it as a rogue mixed with a druid, sort of. But this does mean that I have, I think, 16 classes in total to create. Oh boy. I'm not looking forward to doing this. I mean, I am looking forward to doing this because it's a ton of fun and I love the game, but oh boy, this is going to be a lot more work. All right, let's get moving. So a couple things about the Ravens. First and foremost, the old versions of Ravens automatically hit. They changed that in patch 2.4, I think, and made it so that it has an attack rating, and the attack rating goes up very, very nicely. The damage is not all that much. At level 1, it's actually pretty decent. You get 2 to 4 damage over 12, or not over 12 hits, in each of 12 hits. The number of hits is always the level of the Ravens plus 11, I think. And the damage is always, I think, a range of 2, a very, very small range, until you get to higher levels. The max Ravens you can have is 5. So let's look at it at level 20. So you can see that the attack rating goes up very, very nicely. The damage is not really all that good. You're using this more for blinding, but it's still passive damage. So you get 31 hits from 5 Ravens, and that is really, really nice. That's 155 hits of 73 to 94. It's pretty decent. It's a pretty simple ability. There's nothing really much to take away from this, so I'm going to throw out some ideas that I had for creating this. Kind of inspiration of sorts, but also I've got some planned ideas that I want to do. So the first thing that came to mind was using Find Familiar. You can see right here that the Raven is already on that list, but it's not really that good. I mean, the Raven itself is just, it's decent, but if you wanted, perception, it's got a +3 perception, which is great. But the Hawk has perception +4, and I think advantage in daylight, and the Owl has flyby and dark vision and stealth and a whole lot more. So the Raven is just not really that good. But I'm going to put a pin on that and come back to it. Find Familiar is pretty interesting. The reason why I chose Find Familiar as a way to base this summoning thing off of is partially because it gives you a lot more utility, because you can make your familiar disappear. Oh, that's the wrong one. You can make your familiar disappear and reappear, so you can kind of quote-unquote summon it back and forth. You can communicate with it telepathically, and you can deliver touch spells if you really need to. So it gives it a little bit more utility than, you can summon a Raven. And that's basically it. Secondarily, I don't want somebody getting Find Familiar and having all of these Ravens and all these other summons, so throwing that in here, learning it, and casting it through this ability, it kind of cuts down on the number of things you have to juggle. Summoner, Necromancer. Sorry, I had a thing in my throat there. But jumping back to this Raven stat block, did you know that there is a group of stat blocks that are swarms? Oh yes, swarms. See, a singular Raven is pretty good, but when you have a swarm of Ravens, you'll notice that there's a handful of changes from the base Raven stat block. Instead of a tiny beast, it is a medium swarm of tiny beasts. It has more hit points. Pretty much everything's the same, except for, look at this, resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, and then a handful of condition immunities. This way, it kind of mimics this flock of ravens. It's a swarm of ravens. They deal more damage, all sorts of really, really nice things. So, considering that ravens in Diablo matches very, very nicely with the swarm of ravens here, I think I'm going to pull some inspiration from Swarm of Ravens. So more than just using Find Familiar to just say, oh, you can summon a swarm of ravens, I want to have an actual stat block, because as Find Familiars, as familiars that are summoned through Find Familiar, they can't attack. See, a familiar can't attack, but can take other actions as normal. And the Pact of the Chain Warlock has an ability that allows them to use their familiar to attack. So I might take a look at that. Probably not, but I think let's jump into the creation process. Alright, I think I've got enough here to make a video. Let's see. Ravens. When you take the subclass at 3rd level, you learn the spell Find Familiar and can cast it at will as a ritual without requiring material components. When you cast it this way, you can choose one of the normal forms for your familiar or use the Raven Flock stat block below. Additionally, when you take the attack action, you can forego one of your own attacks to allow your familiar to make one attack with its reaction. When you reach 6th, 10th, and 14th levels in this class, you gain access to additional options for Find Familiar. Alright, the stat block. Raven Flock. Small swarm of tiny beasts unaligned. Armor class 12. Hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. Speed 10 feet. Fly 50 feet. Strength 6. Dexterity 14. Constitution 8. Intelligence 3. Wisdom 12. Charisma 6. Skills, Perception +5. Condition immunities, Charmed, Frightened, Grappled, Paralyzed, Petrified, Prone, Restrained, Stunned. Senses, Passive Perception 15. Languages, understands the languages you speak. Challenge, none, or null, actually. Proficiency bonus, equal to your bonus. Special qualities, Swarm. The swarm can occupy another creature's space and vice versa, and the swarm can move through any opening large enough for a tiny raven. The swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. Actions, Peck. Melee weapon attack, your spell attack modifier to hit, reach 5 feet. One target in the swarm's space, a number of d4s equal to Raven Flock's hit points, piercing damage. If a creature is damaged this way, it must succeed a Constitution saving throw or be blinded until the end of its next turn. So let's break this down, top to bottom. Find Familiar, I mentioned why I would go with that spell. It also kind of fits very nicely. It's kind of secondarily to that. I think I mentioned it briefly, but I don't want to have Ravens and Spirit Wolf and Dire Wolf and a Grizzly all on the battlefield at the same time. It just really makes it a ton of bookkeeping. The Necromancer can kind of get away with it because they're all the same stat block, and so you don't have to juggle bonuses to hit and special abilities and all that. It's just, I need to keep track of one stat block and a handful of hit points, and that's it. So I'm sorry for not being able to give you the Zoo Druid, but, you know, them's the breaks. Let's see. Okay, so it gives you an additional option to use the Raven Flock stat block, and I threw in the phrase from the Pact of the Chain Warlock that allows you to replace your action with your familiar's, replace your attack with the familiar's attack. Now this is a bit problematic. You see, with the Necromancer, you want to use, the way that it's supposed to work is that you use your action to cast curses and your bonus action to command your skeletons, because they have the kind of reskinned Horde Master here, which is they can use your bonus action to issue commands to any number of creatures you've summoned. However, the Druid is more of can be more of a frontline person, or at least a midliner, because they have Were form. They can go werewolf and deal damage, werebear and be a tank, and so they want to use potentially their action to attack and their bonus action to command their vine. So, yeah, when you have another stat block that you could potentially mix in there, you want 3 different attacks, because you want to attack with your were form, and then you want to attack with your ravens and attack with your vine. But that's 3 attacks and some sizable damage, number of d4s equal to their hit points. But that is still a lot of damage. Keep in mind, somebody, even a fighter at level 3, if they're dual wielding, is like, I'm going to get a d10 and then a d6, or a d8 and a d6, or a d4 or 2d6 or something like that. And that's just a lot of damage that you're able to send down range. So this is not a final thing. Horde Master might get changed. I don't know exactly how, but definitely something to look at. Drop me some comments. See if you'd be able to figure this out, because I would love some help. Anyway, so when you reach 6th, 10th, and 14th levels, that's when you get your Spirit Wolf, Direwolf, and Grizzly. And then running through the rest of the stat block. It is a small swarm rather than a medium swarm. The reason being is this thing right here, hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. The idea is that you're summoning a number of ravens equal to your proficiency bonus. And so if they get hit, I forgot that one. So what I was supposed to put in here is the ability that caps damage at 1. So if they get hit with a meteor swarm, it caps it at 1 damage. Now keep in mind, if something has multi-attack, they can attack and attack and attack, and suddenly there's 3 ravens gone. But they're not just going to slap this thing and immediately destroy the whole flock. And that's why this peck ability or attack is worded weirdly. A number of d4s equal to Ravenflock's hit points. Not maximum hit points, current hit points. Because if you're going to be smacking somebody with 3 ravens, that's going to be 3 d4s. Now, it's potentially, I could say a flat number and just say that it's a number of hit points, or a number of an amount of damage equal to its hit points, and focus more on the Constitution saving throw, because you're starting off with 2d4, and that's pretty sizable. But I don't know, it's something to tweak. The rest of the stuff here is just boilerplate for the swarm. For the ravens, swarm of ravens, same thing with this right here. I will be adding that damage cap in. And then that peck, I think I've already explained it. I did have to say that if it is a creature, or if a creature is damaged this way, because I looked at the wolf stat block and it said, it deals some amount of damage, and then if it's a creature, it must make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone. I didn't really like the way that it was worded, so I worded it a little bit differently, but it's basically the same thing. As for why it is blinded until the end of its next turn, that's actually pretty powerful, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. All right, special qualities. How should I word this? Sure. Okay. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. At least for that section. I don't know if I should wrap that into Swarm or have some other thing to call it. I don't know, damage cap. But by and large, that is the Raven's ability. It's nothing crazy. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I really would like this juggling. 3 different attacks. Your Wereform Ravens and your Vine being juggled here. I wouldn't mind it if it was just kind of 2 out of 3. The Summoner is kind of that almost backliner because they're sending out their familiars to deal some damage. But I also wouldn't mind seeing it that you get right up close and personal with, fighting right alongside your summons. I wouldn't mind it either way. But yeah, go ahead and drop me a comment. See if you can help. See if you can help me with this. All right, I think that about wraps it up. Nothing else, I think, to say. So you can find me at XenosFan2, that is XENOZFAN2 on Twitter and Reddit. You can contact the channel directly at Diablo TODND on Twitter and YouTube. And thank you much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good whatever.